Hi everyone, it's Natasha here from the Nextweek team, and today we are going live with day 3 of our 7-day DevOps challenge. Who is here after doing projects 1 and 2 of our challenge? I'm really excited to be doing day 3 with you guys because this project is almost a bit of a milestone moment. The first 2 projects of our series, we've been using VS Code, we've been hanging out with GitHub, and now we're really going into the code series of services that are available in AWS. So I'm really excited for all of us to see the intense, I would say, relationship that your web app is going to have with AWS across the rest of this series. Well, if you're completely new here and you're thinking, what is the 7-day DevOps challenge? What is CodeArtifact? What is securing packages? Just know we don't assume any experience at all. I highly recommend checking out the videos for projects 1 and 2 of this series before doing this one, and the link for that is in the description box below. But otherwise, let's get into it, and then I'll also explain all of the concepts as we go. Okay, so looking at where we're sitting in our amazing CI/CD pipeline diagram, today we're working with AWS CodeArtifact to secure your web apps packages. So we're going to be working with this service over here called CodeArtifact. Now, if you're new to CodeArtifact, just know that CodeArtifact is an artifact repository. In the last project, we worked with GitHub, which is a code repository. Now, an artifact repository is storing something else for you. It's not storing the source code that you're building. It's storing something else called packages. Okay, so what are packages? Quick little intro. When you're building an app, okay, like for us, we're using Maven, we're using Java to build a web app. You don't usually create every single thing from scratch. Instead, your web app is made up of different kinds of packages and the code that you write. These packages are like chunks of code. They're code that other developers have written in the past, and they kind of put it up online so that everyone can grab it and use it in their web app to help them quicken the web app development process. Okay, so it's kind of like how instead of making everything from scratch when you cook pasta, you can go to the supermarket and grab some pasta sauce and kickstart, with this pasta sauce that already exists. Packages are the same thing. They just come with lots of predefined code so that when you write your own web app, you really don't have to write every single thing from scratch. So CodeArtifact is an artifact repository, which means that it's the place for storing all of these packages that you're using. It's an important part of the CI/CD pipeline because it makes sure that if an engineering team is working together on a shared project, everyone is using the exact same packages and the exact same versions of those packages. It's very, very, very easy to lose track of packages when you're building a web app. I know I just compared it with pasta sauce, but imagine if cooking pasta requires 100 different kinds of pre-built ingredients. I would say CodeArtifact and web app packages are exactly the same. It's not usually just 1 or 2 packages that you're storing in CodeArtifact. It's probably in the tens, in the hundreds, and in some projects in the thousands of packages. So that's why you need an artifact repository to really keep all of these different versions of all of these different packages in a simple place. Okay, so big hello to everyone in the meantime. This is so cool. Let's go to everyone. Wow, I'm so excited. Thank you so much for spending the extra time, finishing up yesterday's video and joining this one. That's amazing, man. You have amazing timing. Marzena, what a star. Thank you so much for joining, and hello to you too. We got Sachin 3 for 3. My goodness, it's so good to see you again. And Tim Timmel AI Studio, of course, 3 for 3, of course, with Gangada as well. This is awesome. Welcome back. So if you're new to the 7-day DevOps challenge, you are sitting kind of in the middle now of the DevOps challenge because we're doing 7 projects in total. This one's project 3. Across this entire challenge, we're building from scratch a CI/CD pipeline that automates the build and deployment of a web app. So this is 100% a hands-on challenge. We don't assume any experience at all, but we do highly encourage you to write documentation along the way, and we show you how. Okay, I'm following the high touch version of this project today. I'd highly recommend following the high touch if you're here as a beginner. And as you do these projects, you get to answer tasks, and these tasks turn into complete documentation for you. So as an example, if this is your first time checking out documentation with Nextwork, here's an example of a piece of documentation that you could create, and you're gonna get to generate this documentation with every single project that you do in this series. So yes, that means 7 pieces of documentation by the end of the week to help you build your portfolio. Yeah, so I hope you enjoy. And yeah, this is the kind of documentation that you're gonna get to create by the end of this project. Cool beans. All right, wow, so many people in the chat right now. Aman saying hi to you, and you can definitely ask questions. And we've got Mario saying, hi Natasha, another amazing challenge day. That's so sweet, Mario. Thank you so much. Okay, so this project is split into 3 parts because the project is starting to blow into a bigger and bigger and bigger kind of process every single time we set it up. So to make things a little bit simpler, let me just talk through those 3 parts so that when we get into the details of setting things up, we're less likely to feel a little lost. Okay, so we've got a little diagram here that kind of describes really what we're going to be setting up today. We've got you as an IAM user. We've got a key pair here. We have your development environment, which is in this big square here. And then we've got CodeArtifact and GitHub. You know, quite a few moving parts. By the end of this challenge, this 7 days, we can do this entire thing. But for now, let's just focus on this half. And in part 1 of this project, we're going to be redoing project 1 of the series. So that means we'll be creating the development environment here. And let's see how quickly we can do it now that this is our second time round. And then in part 2 of this project, we're going to be setting up GitHub, which is our code repository storing all of the source code for our web app. Now this part is going to be like 5 minutes for you if you've already set up your GitHub repository in the previous project. Shout out to everyone that did that previous project with me yesterday. This setup is going to be about 5 minutes for us today. But if you're completely new, just know that we've also written the entire step-by-step guide for getting up to speed. And yeah, I hope that guide is super helpful for you, and you can always ask questions. Then finally, part 3 of this project today is setting up the CodeArtifact part. So this is the repository that's going to be storing all of the packages that help us build our web app that we create here. So as a part of creating CodeArtifact, we're also going to be creating a few other things that you might notice in this diagram. You might notice that, now, you know, surrounding our EC2 instance, we've got this spicy red border here called an instance profile. We're going to be learning what that means. But as a little teaser, this instance profile is going to give your EC2 instance the permission to access what you set up here. So it's all about permissions, this red border. Another thing that you might notice is another file that we're going to be creating today called settings.xml. And this file is pretty much the settings file that tells Maven, which is your package manager for your web app. It tells Maven, this is where you can go to find packages. Okay, that's what settings.xml is going to do. So we've got some new things coming up. We've got some old things that we're going to be redoing. I hope you enjoy this project, and let's get into it. All right? Cool. In this project, we will demonstrate how to set up CodeArtifact as our CI/CD pipelines artifact repository. We're doing this project to learn the importance and value of having an artifact repository. It's a huge time saver. Very good. Okay, so let's get started. All right, now I know it looks like we have a bunch of steps to go through today, and I'm really excited to show you guys the secret mission. But just know we're going to be doing every single step together, and for all of us who have done the previous 2 projects, step 3 is something that you can completely skip. And I'm just going to chuck that link to the project guide in the chat. I see someone's asked about it. All right. Also answering H's question, I was revising yesterday's project and was wondering if we should always install Git on the EC2 instance when deploying web apps on AWS. Well, this is a good question. So you're going to be needing to install Git every time you need to run a Git command. That's truly the purpose of installing Git in the first place, and that's why we installed Git in the previous project, because we needed to run some Git commands. If you don't need to run Git commands, you don't need to install Git. Git is really there for version control, so it's up to you on whether or not you want to use that tool. Industry standard is yes, we would always have Git going so that we can track our changes and also store our code in a GitHub repository. I hope that helps, H. In short, we always install Git if we're going to be running some Git commands. And for the rest of the series, we are always going to be running Git commands. So I would install Git for every single EC2 instance I launch for this DevOps challenge. All right, so let's kick things off by launching that EC2 instance. So here we go. We're going to be launching that EC2 instance here. And for H that's asking this, so also on the EC2 instance, you'll be installing Git because the EC2 instance is where you might be running that Git command. I hope that helps, H. Let me know if you have any other questions about that. All right, do you remember why we're setting up an EC2 instance? You know, this instance will be our virtual server in the cloud where we'll develop our Java web app. It's important because EC2 provides the compute resources we need to host the application, to build our application, not host. I should correct this. So let me just add correction. To build our application code. Hosting is a different EC2 instance here. So we're going to be talking about hosting our application and later on in this series, but not in this project. So let me just make that correction that we're building our application code. And let's launch that now. So to set up for this project, we're launching an EC2 instance because it will become the web server, it will become the server where we develop our web app code. Okay, because of this, we'll call this EC2 instance our development environment. Awesome, team. Okay, now let's see how quickly you can set up your EC2 instance and connect to it in this project. It's our third time doing this now, so challenge yourself. Can you do this without much guidance? Can you try to do this without looking at, while pausing this video? You know, you're totally welcome to. You know, we'll start by logging into the AWS Management Console. So this is me logged in as my IAM admin user. Okay, and I'm just going to move my step-by-step guide to this side so that we can have both screens up. All right, and to Aman asking, does launching an EC2 instance cost money? So no, launching an EC2 instance doesn't cost money as long as you are in the first 12 months of your AWS account. So AWS comes with a free tier, and that free tier lets you launch EC2 instances and run them. But you just have to make sure that how you configure that EC2 instance is free tier eligible. And that's the reason why we do these projects, because we're going to show you exactly how you can do all of this for free without getting charged. Just make sure that your account is under 12 months old. Okay, so we're going to be visiting that EC2 console now. So let's hit up EC2. I'm going to say, hey, EC2, we're going to launch an instance today. EC2 is probably very familiar with us. It's our third time visiting this service in this series. So it's going to say, here we go again. And we're like, yep, we're launching an EC2 instance. Cool. So let us select launch instances. And then, as always, we're going to be calling our instance Nextwork DevOps your name. And as a heads up for today's live, I want to be showing you the key parts of today's project and really go through that in detail. And the key parts for today's project is part 3, which is about CodeArtifact. So you're going to see that I'm going to be setting up the EC2 instance, connecting it, and using GitHub relatively quickly because I will be doing this live with the assumption that we've done projects 1 and 2 together. And if you want a slower demo of these setup steps, I highly recommend checking out the videos for the first 2 projects, which are in the description box. So yeah, with that context, I'm just going to be setting up that EC2 instance now, which we've done from the first project. And I'm sorry, I have this habit of scrolling really fast here, but please, I would recommend checking that your AMI is free tier eligible, so you don't get charged like Aman's asked. And also make sure that your instance type is t2.micro, which is free tier eligible. Now, for your key pair, we are always going to be using a key pair to connect to our EC2 instance. So make sure that if you don't have a key pair here that you have access to, just click on Create New Key Pair and make your key pair name Nextwork-DevOps. All right, so we're going to create that now. Let's create the key pair, and it's going to get downloaded into our computer straight away. So with this key pair that gets downloaded, where are we going to store it? I hope you remember we're storing this in our desktop. So let's store in our desktop over here a new folder. So let me zoom in so you can see it. I'm going to create a new folder and I'm going to title it DevOps like this. And we're going to drag our private key that we just downloaded as we set up the key pair, drag that into the DevOps folder. Should be in there now. There we go. Okay, so we're here now. We've got our key pair in the DevOps folder. The private key file in the DevOps folder. And if you are wanting some explanations for all of these concepts, just know that we have them available right now in the project guide, so you can always read them as you go. As a quick recap, the key pair is really about your permissions to unlocking and accessing your EC2 instance. So when we created this key pair here, we're essentially saying, I'm going to have half of the key, your AWS is going to keep the other half, and this is our half of the key that we're now storing in our desktop. Okay, this is our half. So when we want to connect to our EC2 instance, we're going to pass our half to AWS and we're going to say, hey, this is my half. This proves that I have access to the EC2 instance because I have half of the key. AWS will match it up with their half. And AWS will say, oh yeah, it does match up with my half of the key, which means that you do have access and I can let you in to your EC2 instance. So great to have a key pair set up, absolutely required. And for our network settings, do make sure that you are allowing SSH traffic from just your IP address. And make sure that your IP address matches what you find if you were to Google, what's my IP? Because that can change. So your IP address can easily change when you change location, when you change Wi-Fi networks. If you change devices, sometimes that can actually change your IP address. So just double check this IP and then we'll launch the instance. Okay. So I realized that we didn't go through this part in detail, but it's true that before you launch it, you can always check, am I just launching one instance? Am I using that free tier AMI? Am I using the free tier instance type? I just realized this is something you can't easily tick. Oh no. That's all right. But if you like to imaginary tick it with me, we're just gonna check. Yep, we launched one instance. Check, it was the free tier eligible AMI. Check, it was the free tier eligible instance type. And then there was a new security group set up for that with a storage of 8 GB, which are the default settings. So if we didn't do anything special, these are the 2 settings that will pop up on the side. So all of that was correct for us, which is great. It means that we can move on to the next step. Great. So we've launched an EC2 instance now, and Let me know if you have any questions, and we'll keep on going. All right, so you've launched your EC2 instance, and now we're going to try set up the web app by connecting to that instance over VS Code. So what we're going to do is we're now onto this step where we have our EC2 instance launched, and we want to use our key pair, our private key, to say, hey, can I get access to my EC2 instance? I want to set up a web app inside. So let's go ahead and do that. So in this step, we are connecting to our EC2 instance. And setting up Git because we need to set up a web app inside our instance. Cool. Okay, great. Do you have VS Code installed on your computer? If you do, let's just launch VS Code now. So I'm just going to open up VS Code here. Launch that. Oh, and while we're waiting, I can see we've got a question that says, hi, I'm getting connection refused. I'm guessing this is for a later step in this project. So if you'd like to wait with me, Anitha, we can work on this together. But did you get to try checking out the help banners within our project guide? So in our step-by-step project guide, we usually have links to frequently asked questions and troubleshooting help exactly for that era. So let me know if you see it. If you can't see it, I'd highly recommend checking out our project guides for projects 1 and 2 of this 7-day DevOps challenge. Ooh. Okay, but we're here now. So we're here inside VS Code. And do you remember why we're in VS Code? We're in VS Code to help us with setting up our web apps code. So VS Code is an IDE. It basically helps us with writing code in a very, very simple and easy and beautiful way. It's just like why you will go to Microsoft Word or why you might go to Google Docs to write a document. You know, you could simply use a text file, like a simple text file, but it's not the easiest way to write documents, you know, which is why we prefer the software that's available. VS Code is the software that we'd use to write code. And in this case, what we're going to be using VS Code for is also to connect to our EC2 instance. So make sure you open a terminal, and if you don't know where that is, you can select terminal at the top and select new terminal like this. Okay, so this might be what it looks like when you open VS Code. So what we're going to do is we're going to open a new terminal like this. And I like letting my terminal take over the entire screen so we can see it all properly. So it's going to look a little zoomed in for me. All right, so now in our terminal, we're going to want to start creating that web app inside our EC2 instance. And how we do that is, don't forget, we can use the private key that we have to tell AWS that we want to connect to that instance, go inside that instance, and then set up the web app when we're inside. So let's do those steps now. Let's tell our terminal that we want to go inside our EC2 instance. To do that, we need to first figure out, we need to first tell our terminal, okay, where's the key? Where's the key that we just created in our desktop? Because we have this handy little key here, but technically our terminal doesn't really know where that is. It doesn't really know where to go to find this key. So this key, as we can see, is sitting inside our DevOps folder, which is inside our desktop folder. So we can start by telling our terminal that. We're going to say, hey, terminal, we're going to go inside our desktop folder, and from that, go inside that DevOps subfolder. Open that, and we're going to say, let's see what are the contents inside. Okay, ls. And then once you're inside, make sure to actually give yourself the permissions to use that file. So I'm going to run this for macOS and Linux, and if you want the Windows command, it's in the next tab over. So you can run this command that lets you give yourself the permission to use this private key. So we're going to say we have access now to use this private key, and then we're going to run the spicy little command that lets us connect to our EC2 instance using the private key we just gave ourselves access to. Okay, so this is the command. I hope you remember it. It's SSH, which means let's use the SSH protocol, -I, network devops.pen, which is the name of our private key. So we're going to say we're going to take the private key, and then we're going to use that SSH protocol to connect to our EC2 instance. But hey, where is our EC2 instance? The location of your key is here, but now you need to add in the location of your EC2 instance to finish this command. So I've just taken away that replacement placeholder, that lets us type in your EC2 instance's address. And I'm going to go into my instance here. And let's together find the address of that EC2 instance. So tick the checkbox next to your EC2 instance. Whoa. Let's see if I can, oh, I can't drag that up, that's okay. And you should be able to find the address by looking at the public IPv4 DNS for your EC2 instance. So copy that. So I'm gonna copy that, it's copied now. And I'm gonna paste that here. And this now tells my terminal, okay, you've got the address of the EC2 instance, you've got the address of the private key, let's do that, set up that connection now. Okay, and this is our terminal saying, okay, just checking you trust this instance. You know, this instance is safe to connect to. We're like, yeah, it is, okay? All right, and this is me all connected to my EC2 instance now. And this is exactly what we want to see, so a successful connection. Well done, everyone. And I'm just going to check the chat for any questions. Ooh, okay, I see we do have questions. All right, Gangada asks, I'm getting an error as SSH is not recognized when running the SSH command on Windows machine. Is there any way to resolve this? Oh, this is a great question, Gangada. So SSH is not recognized. I would personally check out WSL. So see if you can try run this command using the WSL, which means you can run like Linux commands on your Windows machine. I would also check out whether or not, it's possible for you to just, instead of trying to run this in your terminal, try running this directly using the remote SSH extension that VS Code offers. So you know how in the next step, we're gonna try run the exact same command, but this time in VS Code over this extension. My recommendation to you, Gangada, is to just skip the running of this command in the terminal. See if the command actually works if you were to just connect straight via VS Code, which I'm about to do next. So let's do this next steps together, Gangada, and let me know if you're still stuck. I'm very curious now. I wonder how we can resolve this together. Now, as a heads up, it is super, super common to be running into an error in this place. Like extremely, extremely common. And the reason for this is because running like SSH commands can look a little different depending on the device that you're using. It can get blocked depending on the permission settings of your key. You can get blocked depending on the network settings of the EC2 instance. There's just so many possible reasons why this command might not work for you. So it's totally normal. It's totally normal if you get stuck here. And we absolutely have a lot of support available in the Network community if that's the case. So you're so welcome to share your question in the Network community. If you're new to this, let me show you where you can find it. So we always have Ask the Network community links just like sprinkled around our project guides. So if you're stuck here and you can't seem to find the right help for it, make sure to check out the community and add your question in here. Yeah? Cool beans, okay? Well, I'm gonna scroll back up to where we were before. and get us back into speed. How is the pacing of this project demo so far? Am I going too fast? Would you like to slow down a little? Or does this feel right if you've done the first 2 projects already? Let me know. Okay, cool. So let us now, big shout out to Amber saying, another great DevOps day. Yeah, it's going to be a huge DevOps week this week. So thanks so much for stopping by. All right, so we are connected via the terminal now to our EC2 instance. And now that we're inside our EC2 instance, every command we run gets run directly it will affect directly our EC2 instance. You know how sometimes when we are running commands, those commands are like giving instructions to our local computer. We're like, yeah, go inside the DevOps folder. Please give my private key the permission, give me the permission to write or use my private key. Now that you see EC2 user at the bottom here at the start of your terminal, it means all the commands you run from now is not going to be run or impacting your local computer. It's now going to be impacting your EC2 instance. And thank you so much for the feedback about the speed, everyone. That's really, really sweet. Alvin, I got all my faith in you, man. You can do this. I know that it feels a little fast if you are jumping into this challenge fresh, but I promise you, you've got all the guidance and the support. And I'm really, really stoked to hear that you're liking this series. Ooh, this is awesome. Okay, great. All right, so we've got the commands to install Maven. And let's just run that now so that we're installing Maven into our EC2 instance. Okay, next up. That was super fast. Maven's all installed now. And next up, we can run the commands for installing Java. Okay, off we go with installing Java. And we've got Sachin asking a question as well. Oh, great question, Sachin. You're asking a Windows question. So you're asking about what username needs to be entered here. Correct. So you do need to enter a username that you find by running the command who am I. Okay, so who am I is a command that works for both Windows, and I think it works for Linux as well, so I might just run it in a second. But it shows you the username that you're using. Try having a go at running that, Sachin. Try running who am I and seeing whether or not that gives you a username. Cool. You know what? Let me just try that here as well. Who am I? Aha! So in this case, Linux does give us an answer. It says, you are EC2 user. That's correct. That's the username that we're using in this EC2 instance. Cool. All right. So we've installed Maven in Java now, and these are the 2 tools that we're going to need in order to build our web app. So now that we have these tools installed, what's next for us is to just double check that we have the right versions installed. It is so normal and so it's so okay if you end up finding out that you didn't actually install these tools properly. So to check, you can run these commands. First one is called mvn-v, which basically says, Maven, what version are you right now? And Maven here says, oh, I'm version 3.5.2. Okay, we don't really care actually what Maven version we're seeing. It's more the fact that Maven even gives us a version number, because if you didn't install Maven, you're not going to see a version number. It's going to say like, oh, Maven command not recognized or command not found. And if you see that error, it simply means let's run the command for installing Maven one more time. Same with Java. Looks slightly different. It's not java-v, it's java-version. But again, it gives us a version number, which is what we need. Great. So now that that's done, we can confirm that we have the tools installed, we have our EC2 instance that's working great. Why don't we just take things to the next level now and connect our EC2 instance with VS Code? No more just connecting via our local terminal, which is like saying you're connecting your computer over to over to your EC2 instance. Now we're going to go and connect VS Code to your EC2 instance. And what that's going to do is it's going to help us with setting up all of our files on the left-hand navigation bar. So when we create our web app, we want to see all of our web apps files in a very, very neatly organized tree here. And we can't see that until we do this connection step. Once we do this connection step, editing the code for our web app is also going to be easier. So let's just do that now. So we can install the extension remote-ssh. We've already done this in the last two projects, so I'm going to skip that. But if you're new to this, you can do this in just one click. Just find the extensions icon, type in remote-ssh, click install, and that's it. And then you'll have remote-ssh installed on your computer as well. So once you've installed that, let's open up these double arrows that show up that let you connect to your EC2 instance. And then we're going to say, all right, let's connect to an EC2 instance. And an existing EC2 instance is going to show up. Now, we don't really need this one because this one is the old EC2 instance from our previous project. So if you see this, let's not use it. Okay, we're not going to use it. We're going to select configure SSH hosts to tell VS Code, my friend, we don't actually want to connect to that instance anymore. We've deleted that instance now. Okay, so what you can do is you can delete all of the content inside this config file, which lets you start fresh. Okay, so once you delete all of that old information, you're going to see what we were supposed to see, which is when you select connect to host, you can just add new SSH host like this. This is what we want to see. So let's add a new SSH host. This means let's run again the command for connecting to an EC2 instance, but this time VS Code is going to be running that so that VS Code can connect to that instance. I hope that's clear, but if that sounds a bit confusing, just let me know. And we also have our first project in the series that tackles exactly this. Do you remember the command? Do you remember the command? I hope you do. Oh, I'm feeling nervous. But the command is ssh-i. What's next? Do you remember the command? So after this, you also add in the path to your private key file. So you would say Natasha Ong is my username, but /desktop /DevOps folder /nextwork devops.pem is the path to my key pair, to my private key file. But you can always put in your path by finding out the path by, if you're using Mac, you can right click on your file like this and then just copy the path like this. If you're using Windows, I think there's a command that helps you output the path of something. I think the command is actually just called path. Let me know if that works for you, and if you're stuck, we can always do a little detour and talk about that too. So we've got nextwork devops.pem, and here we write ec2-user at, what do we copy here now? Do you remember? It's the location of our EC2 instance. Always, when you're SSH connecting to an instance, just know location of my private key, location of the instance. You just need to give the SSH command 2 locations, and that's how you can successfully connect to that EC2 instance. All right, so let's go EC2 user at, and then enter that address, enter it. And then you're going to see that you can select a file to update. Just select that top version. And all done. Your host is added. You can open your config file to confirm that all of your details are in here now. Great. That means you can now select connect to host again and connect directly to your EC2 instance like this. Oh, it says permission denied for my key. Oh, did I write the right... I think I might have made a mistake with the location of my private key file. If I were to just double check that. I have a feeling I was supposed to do a slash at the start and slash user slash. Yeah, okay. So I was supposed to write slash users slash Natasha on desktop DevOps network DevOps.pen. So I made a mistake there with the location of my identity file, which is the location of your private key. So let me just try that again and just try connecting, this time with the updated location. And we've got Alvin asking a quick question. Do you have a template to follow along with, or are you making one as you go? Ooh, what template are you talking about here? Is this a template like the project guide that I'm using? The project guide, I can add that to the chat now, but I hope this is what you were looking for, Alvin. Or are you looking for like a template for the command I ran? The command I ran is also in the project guide right here. I hope that helps. Let me know what you're thinking. I wonder. Okay, so we're gonna keep on going with our setup. So in this project, I will assume that we've done projects 1 and 2 together. So if this project is completely new to you, like you haven't done project 1 or project 2, it's gonna look a little bit, it's gonna be a little bit harder to follow along, okay? Because the steps for following along are in this tab for you. Let me share the context for this, but I thought I'd like to mention. Okay, so what's next for us is now that you're inside your instance, you can even see the confirmation here that you have this little arrow button that also says SSH and the location of your EC2 instance. This tells us that you are now connected via SSH to the EC2 instance that you were connecting to. Amazing. Next up for us is to actually just write that web app code. This is where you can have 2 options, because if you have done projects 1 and 2 of the 7-day DevOps challenge, you would already have the web app code generated before, and that web app code is actually inside a GitHub repository. All right, so this is the default setting that we have for everyone. You've already generated the web app code before, it's in GitHub. Or if this is your first project with us, you might be like, oh, I've never generated any web app, like I need to do everything from scratch. If that's you, click on this tab here, and then now you can go through all the steps for doing everything from scratch, which also comes with explanations with every single step still. So we're not gonna leave anyone behind if you haven't done projects 1 or 2. It's simply that your instructions are in a separate tab, all right? So for everyone here that's also done projects 1 and 2, we're gonna be using this setting today. And let's clone the code that already lives in the web app, that already lives in GitHub. Cool, I'm excited because yeah, like with every single project you do, you actually get more and more efficient, which is amazing. It's almost like the CI/CD pipeline at work. But to clone our code and just get started straight away with what we've already set up before, you just have to run a handy command called git clone. And this answers H's question previously around whether or not we need to install Git. And this is the reason why we still need to install Git, because in this project, we need to use Git to clone the code that we've written in the past. So let's write that up now. So git clone, and it says git clone and insert the URL to your GitHub repository. All right, so let's go into our GitHub repository. Oh, this is my failed connection that we no longer need. Let's go into our GitHub repository and find the repository that you set up in the previous project. Okay, so I have the link to my repository now. Oh, this is not the right one. Okay. I just realized I'm logged into the wrong user, which is why it doesn't look right. I need to switch my user over to my network user. And then you can find your repositories like this by clicking on your profile icon and selecting your repositories once you log in. And then when you're here, don't forget to click on the GitHub repository that you set up in the last project, which was nextwork-web-project like this. Cool. So to Alvin that says you don't see a link to GitHub, this is, if you haven't done the previous project, then maybe you don't have a link to your GitHub repository yet, which is why switching over to the other tab so that you can get all the instructions for setting up your web app and then going into GitHub, like all of that is available for you if this is your first time going through it. If you've already done the previous project, you can find your repository by going into github.com, entering that, and then you can click into your profile icon like this, and then clicking my repositories here to find the repository you've already set up. I hope that helps. Okay, so once you're here, don't forget we're here to clone this code that we've already created in the past. So let us click on that code button here, and let us click on the copy button for our HTTPS URL. Copy that and paste that after git clone. Ah, it says command not found. Ah, I see. So here is a little thing I just realized, which is that we installed Maven in Java, but we haven't installed Git. Oh, I should have realized this. Sorry, team. This will definitely be in the project guide right after this live. But the instructions for installing Git are available, just not right in front of you. Ah, this is so funny. Oh no. Let us install Git, and then we'll be able to clone it. I just realized the commands for installing Git, we haven't run them yet. So let's install Git. And the commands are at the start of step 3. But hopefully by the time you're watching a rerun of this, you can see those commands. You've already run those commands before running into this error. I mean, it's fun error troubleshooting. It's fun troubleshooting live. But I hope it doesn't add to any confusion today. So just as a recap, if you're wondering what's happened there, I tried to clone the code that I created in the previous project, but we don't even have Git installed. And if you don't have Git installed, you can't run Git commands, okay? The command for cloning code definitely requires Git. We simply didn't have that tool in our EC2 instance yet. So I've just run the command now to be like, oh, yeah, let's install Git. Let's install Git. So now I should be able to run that same command, which is git clone, and then the URL of your repository like this. Run that so you can clone your own code. Cool. Okay, so now that that's done, let's open that folder that you've just cloned. So when you clone code, that essentially creates a new folder inside your EC2 instance that says, here's all the code that you cloned. To find it, you simply open up your Explorer, open up the folder, and then here you can select Nextwork Web Project like this, and then press OK to connect straight away. Now, if you get asked if you trust the authors, make sure you select yes, we trust the authors. And here we are. This is all the code that already existed from the previous project, and I've cloned them all now, even including the README. That's how you know. We set up a README in the previous project, and you can see all of that here. You can even click into index.jsp, and you can see that the code you've written in the previous project is all here too. Great. So with that kickstart, you can actually skip step 3. You no longer need to set up that connection from your web app to GitHub. It's already set up. And what we need to do next is to create your CodeArtifact repository. So see you at step 4. And this is us now. We're now ready to set up our CodeArtifact repository. Okay, so CodeArtifact is a fully managed artifact repository like we've learned in our introduction today. We're going to be using CodeArtifact to store and manage our project's dependencies, which means these are all of the code that our project relies on in order to work. This is important because if you have CodeArtifact, you are essentially improving the security and reliability and availability of your web app. Imagine situations where you say, I rely on this external piece of code for my web app to work. And one day, that external piece of code is not accessible anymore. Maybe the developer got hacked and all of their things got deleted. Maybe you didn't have access for some reason because of some networking issue and you couldn't connect and download that package anymore. So many things can happen to stop you from continuing to have access to something that was once available online. So how do you keep yourself safe and protected in these kinds of scenarios? The best option for us is to store our own copy, store our own backups. And that's why we have CodeArtifact, because that's the repository to store those backups of those pieces of code that our web app relies on to work. And that's why we're going to be setting up CodeArtifact in this next step now. Awesome. In this step, we will set up a CodeArtifact repository because CodeArtifact improves the availability and security of our web app. It's used to store dependencies, i.e. things our web app or code, external pieces of code, our web app relies on in order to work. Now, H has asked a great question here. Is the code saved both on GitHub and CodeArtifact? That's a good question. And H, you're going to see very soon what CodeArtifact stores, and it's not code. How I said this is probably a bit confusing. What CodeArtifact stores is not the code that we write here. The code that we write goes in one place, it goes into GitHub. The code that our web app relies on in order to work, those packages, those dependencies are stored on CodeArtifact. So GitHub does not store your packages, and in CodeArtifact doesn't store this source code that we've cloned here. This will always stay in GitHub. So they are both repositories. They are both storing things for our web app, but they're storing completely different things. The separation is quite important, so that's a great question. Okay, so shall we get to know CodeArtifact? Let's head on over to our AWS Management Console and open up CodeArtifact from here. So we're going to select CodeArtifact like this. And I like opening new services in new tabs, so I can always have a separate tab for each of my services that I'm using, which is why I'm just going to open CodeArtifact in that new tab here. And here we are. Welcome to CodeArtifact. To get started with CodeArtifact, you create the repository. So that repository is like that folder that stores all of your packages. Okay, you're going to start with no repositories because we're starting fresh. So let's create one. And I just wanted to call out that I recognize some errors getting mentioned in the chat. So I can still see that Sachin is running into errors here with doing that SSH connection. Did you get to check out the help guide that we have for Windows connections by any chance? Let me send you the link to that in case you haven't seen it yet, Sachin. I might have shared it in our very, very first project together, Sachin. So let me know if that guide wasn't helpful, if you want to see something else to help you with connecting. But let me find this. Let me find this for you. And I'm just going to add you, Sachin, so that you have access to this guide that helps you with connecting via SSH and VS Code over here. Let me know if that guide's helpful, Sachin. Okay, so we have the repository that we're creating now, and let us set up this repository. Okay, Ooh, and let us also talk about what is CodeArtifact before we move on. Okay, so I know we've gone through what is CodeArtifact 2 or 3 times now in this project guide. And I think that repetition is very, very helpful to keep like learning about what is CodeArtifact and why we're using it. So if we were to just set that context one last time, CodeArtifact is a secure central place to store all of your software packages. And I know I mentioned dependencies previously, and I mentioned things like external pieces of code in another definition. And we kind of play around with different words and different definitions so that you're comfortable with these. But just know that they're essentially the same thing. Okay, packages are like external pieces of code that you download and use. And then dependencies basically mean packages you absolutely need. Okay, so you are in safe hands here with this definition. So CodeArtifact, it's a secure place to store your software packages. When you're building an application, you typically use a lot of packages or libraries, and these are things that other developers have created, so you don't want to build from scratch. And the packages that your web app needs in order to survive and to even run, we call those dependencies. So an artifact repository gives you this consistent, reliable place to store and retrieve these dependencies, to store and retrieve these packages. You know, engineering teams love artifact repositories. It's super, super helpful. And all of the major projects I've seen definitely has an artifact repository. There's 3 big reasons why we use artifact repositories. The first one is for security. Now everyone in an engineering team is going to retrieve the packages to run the web app from a secure place, CodeArtifact. This is like that one central place that everyone in the engineering team can visit and download the packages that they need for that web app to work. If this CodeArtifact repository didn't exist, everyone in the team is just going to get this shopping list of packages that they need to download. And where are they going to download it? You know, they might just end up downloading all these packages or all these requirements from unsafe sources on the internet. And that's pretty bad security risk. Of course, it's reliability as well. So because the CodeArtifact, the packages that CodeArtifact stores are like backup, they're like copies, it means that you're always protected if the online version or like the live version of that package goes down. You know, if the developer's version of that package that you usually retrieve by downloading online, if that version is like deleted or corrupted or destroyed, you still have that backup version in your CodeArtifact repository that you can go and use. Yeah, and everyone's going to be working on the same version of that package. Packages can come in so many different versions. Like we ran, Maven had 3.5.2, like specific version number. Same with Java. So many different kinds of version numbers exist. And really, an artifact repository keeps everyone on the same version. So to everyone that's wondering, you know, do these packages come from within the same organization, or can they come from external organizations too? Really great question. And packages can come from external organizations for sure. So you can think of packages as external pieces of code your web app relies on, and those external pieces of code can definitely come from public sources. They can also come from within the organization, like the engineer next to you created a package that your web app uses. If that's the case, that's kind of like an in-house package that you can upload into your repository. And we actually talk about that in our secret mission. We can't see that in the website Network project. Oh, you can't see the project? I'm just gonna double check that we're on the same project guide here. Can you check if this link works for you? I hope so. If it doesn't, I'm in trouble. I'm sure we can work it out if we can't see it. But yeah, keep me updated. I'm very curious to know whether or not this project is available to you. All right. So, all right, I hope that gives us enough context to really keep on going with confidence now with CodeArtifact. And now we're just going to get really hands-on with creating that CodeArtifact repository and seeing that come to life. Oh, we have some exciting steps up ahead. So to everyone that's here, I'm so excited for you. Okay, so let's first define CodeArtifact. CodeArtifact is an artifact repository. and it's an artifact repository service, which means we can use it to create artifacts, to create repositories to store our web apps, packages, and dependencies. Engineering teams use artifact repositories for security, control, and that last one was called reliability. So this is how you could explain to someone else, what is CodeArtifact, and try to explain in your own words as much as you can. I really like thinking about, if you like, just thinking about how would you explain this to a friend or explain this to someone who's completely new to CodeArtifact. Awesome. So thank you so much to Alvin for just clarifying that maybe the link I put on YouTube is not working. So I'll just make sure to update that as well so that other people watching this live stream later on still have access to the project guide. So thanks so much for mentioning. Cool. All right, and if you have any questions still about artifacts and repositories, I'm right here, so we can always talk about it. Let me know what's on your mind. And in the meantime, what we can do next is to actually set up our repository name. The repository name is going to be Nextwork DevOps -CI/CD, nice and simple. And then what's next? We also have a description. This repository stores packages related to a Java web app created as a part of Nextwork's CI/CD pipeline series. Cool. And then next you get to pick your public upstream repository. This says optional, but we are going to want an upstream repository. So let's select this, and let's select Maven Central Store. This is going to become our upstream repository, and if you're new to this concept, just know that an upstream repository is like basically the source of your artifacts. How this usually works is your repository, your artifact repository you're about to set up, is the go-to place for finding all the packages you need to set up your web app. But imagine if you write in your web app's code, and we're going to be using this package to do blah, 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 blah. And turns out that package isn't actually available in your artifact repository. Like, it's not available in CodeArtifact. Instead of freaking out and failing your web app, what CodeArtifact is doing here is saying, hey, you can set up an upstream repository that's like the backup to your CodeArtifact repository. Now, if your CodeArtifact repository doesn't have a package, that request can get sent upstream to the public repository. In our case, it's Maven Central Store, so that you can find the package there instead. Okay, super helpful. And the cool thing is, once you find that repository in the public upstream repository, Maven Central Store, you can then store a local copy in your own CodeArtifact repository. So it's kind of like, I love this analogy that's like, oh, do you imagine if you want to cook, okay, at home, let's say cooking is like building your web app. You want to cook at home and you're like, oh, I'm out of onions. Then you can go to your repository, like, oh, I need an onion to build this web app. So you go to your, to this like random convenience store around the corner, and that's kind of like your local repository. It's just right there. and then you say, hey, I want onions. And they might just give you an onion because they have it, you know, your repository has it. But what if they don't have it? They're like, hey, we're out of onions. You would have to go to like the supermarket or like the next place that might be like a bigger place for you to source your onions. Okay, a place that's more reliable, that usually has everything that you need. So that bigger supermarket or that bigger, more reliable place that you might go to occasionally when the go-to place runs out, that's like your upstream repository, and that's like Maven Central repository for us. Okay, so if you're curious about Maven Central, this is a huge repository we're looking at right now. It's like the App Store of Java, which is like the most popular public repository where developers might be publishing in Java and sharing Java libraries. So if you are building a Java application at all, chances are you'll be using packages that are stored in Maven Central, and that's why it's just such a good upstream repository choice for us. Okay, so let's get into it. A CodeArtifact repository can have an upstream repository, which means a public source of packages that Maven can visit, or basically our web app or whoever is needing a package can visit. If they can't find it in our local CodeArtifact repository. Our repository's upstream repository is Maven Central Store, which is the largest Java repository and is extremely helpful when building a Java web app. So as you might guess, the first time we try to run our CodeArtifact repository, we're going to be using Maven Central repository a lot, because by default, our CodeArtifact repository, we're creating it with no packages inside. We're just creating this blank repository. So the first time you visit CodeArtifact for help, CodeArtifact is going to turn to Maven Central repository for every single request that you have. And you actually get to see that in action in a second, which is going to be cool. So let's select next to finish that up. Okay, so once you've selected next, you're now ready to set up a CodeArtifact domain. Cool. So let's set that up right now, and we're gonna say that our domain is gonna be in our AWS account. Cool. Now this domain is not too important, to be honest, so you don't have to spend too much time worrying what is a domain. Just know that a domain is just a folder to hold multiple repositories in one place. We like domains, okay? We like using domains because you can think of it as this bigger folder that you can use to put in all of your repositories inside. So that if you ever want to manage permissions for multiple repositories at once, you no longer have to go into each repository and say, okay, I now grant permission to this person, to this repository. Oh yeah, I also need to grant them permission to that repository, that one too, that one too, that one too. That there's so much manual work that happens if you need to grant repository for every single person, for every single repository that your code project might need. So domain is kind of like this folder that puts together all of the repositories that belong to a project or belong to an organization, so that you can just say, all right, this group of people all have access to all the repositories in this domain. Done deal, goodbye, all done with permissions. Walk away, focus on something else. Instead of having to manually set up permissions one-to-one. So that's why we like domains. It's very, very helpful for setting up permissions. Okay, and our domain, it's called NextWork. Oh, copied the wrong thing. All right, our domain's called NextWork. A domain is like a folder that holds together multiple repositories under the same project or under the same organization. They're helpful for setting up permission settings, for multiple repositories, and this is CodeArtifact repositories we're talking about, in one go. Our domain is called Nextwork. Well done. Okay, big shout out to H's comment here. AWS is really so interesting. I love that. All right, we're gonna just select next to just proceed there. And we're pretty much done with setting up the repository. That was pretty fast. So in this review page, you can see that we have a package flow. Okay, and this package flow tells us where our packages come from. So as you might notice, we've got external connections, which is Maven Central, and then it's gonna flow into your upstream repository. And then there's also your repository here that you're creating. So you've got your local repository, you've got your upstream repository, and that upstream repository is is that public one called Maven Central Repository. Maven Central Repository is like huge. There's so many packages in there. So trying to grab packages from Maven Central all the time is going to be not the most efficient move. You know, Maven Central Repository is busy enough, the traffic is heavy enough. So the fact that we now have a copy of all of those packages inside our local repository means that we can now also start building our web app and grab all of the code that we need, or the external pieces of code that we need, much faster. Yeah, I love that. So cool beans. Let's take a screenshot of that package flow panel and head over to creating our repository. Okay, so we've got our repository name. Is that correct, everyone? Does it say Nextwork DevOps CI/CD for you? I hope it does. And then is your domain name Nextwork? Okay, I hope it says Nextwork. And does your public upstream repository say Maven Central Store? Good, I hope it does too. So once you've got all of that sorted, we can select create repository and say bye-bye. Well done. Oh dear, this repository stores packages related to a Java web app. We've got a validation error today. Validation errors, the bane of my existence. I see this way too much. So I'm very familiar with this error because it's happened to me quite a few times, but I understand that it can be a little bit shocking to see a red banner if you're seeing this for the first time yourself. A validation error basically says the formatting of something you've entered is not correct. And in this case, they're telling me that the formatting of my description is not correct. Member must satisfy a regular pattern. And this basically tells us that you can't finish your description at a new line character. I think this is what it means. I think it just means you can just simply use, you can write a single sentence, but you can't write paragraphs, you know, like multi-line things. Just write a single long sentence. So in our case, we've got a description here, and I can see that I think it's because there's this cheeky little new line here. Can you see my cursor blinking at this new line? If you're seeing this too, just don't be alarmed. I think we can solve this just literally by deleting that cheeky new line. My goodness, if that solves it, AWS, come on. That was just a new line. Let me go. Oh, okay, we actually solved that error. That's great. But I think the other error I'm getting now is that a domain with the same name already exists, which is a unique error now for me. This is more likely because I accidentally created this domain before. Maybe that's the case. Oh, I think that I know what's happened. Yeah, All right. So you might see this error too. I really hope you don't run into the same error as me, but sometimes what happens when you create something is that when you select create, it's going to create all the other things that work. So it's going to create my domain next work, and it's going to create the upstream repository because AWS doesn't have a problem with how I set those up. You know, they were like, yeah, it's fine. You've got your network domain, that's fine. An upstream repository, you want Maven Central Repository, that's fine. The repository that had a problem with was my local repository. That was the repository that had the faulty description with that new line character. And I don't think AWS liked that very much. But because it liked these two, it just created those two anyway. So what that means is my AWS account had these two resources that were created, and then this last resource that wasn't created. And now when I try to say create repository, it had the audacity to tell me that was an error because it's already created the other two resources for me. I sometimes wish AWS was a bit more transparent about what it's doing in the background when it gives you an error. Because when it gave us that first error, it did not tell us that these two resources were already created. But they did get created. And because they were created, we ran into the second error. And because we ran into that second error, we had to manually delete all of the other things that AWS created just now. So let me just try clicking create repository again and seeing if that error still persists, even after we manually deleted those random things. Okay, there we go. So it's a success now. All right, I know we ran into two different errors there, and all of that started because of a new line character. So yeah, you know, H, what you've mentioned previously, AWS is so interesting. Okay, so I hope if you ran into that error, you're feeling all good. I hope that didn't spook you, but it's totally normal to run into that. Oof. Are we ready to keep going? If you also saw that error, let me know if you're still running into something there. All right, so great job. Our repository is all set up. So now in the next step, we can start connecting our web apps package manager Maven to this exact repository. So why do we need to connect them? Don't forget, Maven, which is one of the tools we installed, is a package manager. As a package manager, its job is to literally manage the packages that goes in and out of your web app. You know, what kind of packages does your web app need to succeed? Maven is in charge of installing them and making sure that you have everything in your environment when you run and build your web app. So because of that, you're going to want to make sure CodeArtifact and Maven, your package manager, are friends. Because Maven is going to be the one that says, I need this repository, I need this package, this package, this package, this package. And then CodeArtifact is going to be the repository that supplies those packages. Oh, you want that package? Yeah, I got you. Like, here it is. Okay, here's that other package you requested. Here's all the packages you request. So Maven is going to receive those packages or retrieve them from the CodeArtifact repository, and that's how it gets all of the things that it needs to build your web app. Now to make sure Maven and CodeArtifact are friends and they can actually talk to each other, there's something that we actually need to set up permissions-wise. CodeArtifact, as you're going to find out, is actually a very, very secure service. By default, not many services can access CodeArtifact. So because not many services can access CodeArtifact, including EC2 instances, we're going to see an error very, very soon that comes from what happens when you try to access CodeArtifact and retrieve packages without the right permission settings. So let's give that a go. We're going to just run into that error on purpose so we can all see the impact of not having permission, and then we're going to give ourselves permissions. In this step, we will try to connect Maven and CodeArtifact. This is because Maven is our web apps package manager, and CodeArtifact is the repository that stores the packages that Maven is looking for. Okay? So we're about to run into some permissions errors because right now, our EC2 instance does not have access to CodeArtifact. Let's see it. All right, so we're gonna pretend we still don't know this whole permission settings thing, and we're gonna very innocently say, let's go connect to Maven and CodeArtifact. To do that, there's actually something handy here that says view connection instructions. So let's click on that, view connection instructions. And here we have some connection instructions that tell you how you can connect Maven with CodeArtifact. So this is awesome, okay? Like literally AWS is giving us a step-by-step guide on connecting these two people. So what we're gonna do now is we're gonna say the operating system that we're using is Mac and Linux. And please make sure, even if you're using a Windows computer, you are picking Mac and Linux. Do you know why? It's because you're not running this command in your local terminal, you're running this command in your EC2 instance. And your EC2 instance is an Amazon Linux 2023 instance. So we're absolutely all using Linux today, even if your local computer is a different operating system. Step 1, it says choose your package manager client. Okay, our package manager client is Maven. You know, we're not using any of these other package managers to retrieve packages for us. We're using MVN, we're using Maven. So here comes a step-by-step guide on connecting Maven with CodeArtifact. Please don't run away, because we're gonna do all of this together, and it's actually a lot easier than it might look. The steps for connecting Maven with CodeArtifact is actually quite simple if you look at these, and let's just break it down. First, you've got an authorization token. And this authorization token basically says, once you run this in your terminal, you're giving your EC2 instance the permission to access CodeArtifact for 12 hours. Great. And I would actually say, to be more specific, it's not about accessing CodeArtifact for 12 hours, it's accessing your CodeArtifact repository for 12 hours. So the specific repository is going to be available for 12 hours once you run this little command in your EC2 instance. Great, then we're going to get access. And what's going to be important once you have access is to set up a file locally called settings.xml. This is another thing that we're going to go into in the next step, so I won't go into too much detail here. But we're going to go into detail in the next step later. For now, let's focus on this one, this part. We just need to run this command, and we get access to the repository. That should be easy as. So let's give that a go now. And I'm horribly zoomed in a very weird way. What's going on, guys? What is this? Oh. Don't think I'm a fan of this background, team. Sorry, team. Just give me 1 second while I set this up. I'm gonna try to figure out why this is happening. Oh. Oh, I think I got it. Oh, wow. Just gonna very carefully set myself back up. I think this looks good. Does this look good? Yeah, I think this is okay. All right, that was wild. And in the meantime, we got a robot here. Hey, good to see you again. And we've also got a great question. Should this step be done every 12 hours? No need. No need at all. I would say you're going to see why. Technically, this step is done, but it's not done manually every 12 hours. You're going to see the reason why CI/CD pipelines are so loved, because you're going to see how we automate the running of this line in the next project. Okay, so let's get into trying to run this command for giving ourselves access. And to do that, I'm going to go back into my terminal, the one that has the SSH connection. Where did that one go? I hope it's still here. It should be. Where did that one go? No, it's right here. Okay, so we're back into our VS Code terminal. And don't forget, you can always run terminal, new terminal to bring it up. And here in your terminal, you can run this command to say, all right, this is the exact command CodeArtifact gave me. Let's get access to the repository. Damn, okay? We don't have permission. It says unable to locate credentials, you can configure credentials, so on and so forth. So we've got a credentials error today. This is basically a really good security feature in action. It's saying that your EC2 instance is going, I don't know who you are, so I can't let you access CodeArtifact. This happens because by default, your EC2 instance doesn't actually have the permission to access your other AWS services like CodeArtifact. It's intentional, to not give your EC2 instance the permission to see CodeArtifact or access CodeArtifact. There's a big security principle in the world of AWS called the principle of least privilege, and it basically means that we only give resources the minimum permissions they need to function. Okay, this is a principle that is kind of like that baseline principle in cloud security. Don't give resources more permissions than they need. In this case, by default, EC2 instances don't always need permission to CodeArtifact. It's just that our one does. So we're going to do a special setting that gives our EC2 instance the permission to visit CodeArtifact. And we're going to be doing this using IAM. All right. So let's go here and answer this question. To access CodeArtifact, we need permission we need EC2 to have the permissions to access CodeArtifact. We ran into an error when retrieving a token because, I just realized I don't think I've answered this question in the best way possible. So to access CodeArtifact, we need an authentication token that allows our EC2 instance to access CodeArtifact for the next 12 hours. We ran into an error when retrieving a token because our EC2 instance does not have the permission to access our AWS resources by default. This follows the principle of least privilege. Great. So to resolve that permissions issue, we're going to go straight into the IAM console. So let's check out IAM together in a new tab. And let's open up IAM like this. Okay, so we've got IAM open now. Very good. And IAM stands for Identity and Access Management. We use IAM to basically tell other services and resources whether they have access to other things. And in our case, we're going to use IAM to tell our EC2 instance, actually, we're going to give you access to CodeArtifact. Now, to start us off, we need to select policies. So policies are like a set of rules. I know we have different kinds of entities. We've got user groups, users, roles, policies. And it kind of goes in levels. User groups is like the highest level. It gives a whole group of people access to things. And then we've got users, which are like our IAM admin user. We've got roles, which are basically a group of policies. And then we've got policies, which are basically specific rules for what you can do and cannot do. So policies is like that foundational entity that powers everything else on top. Everything else is kind of like stacked on top of policies here. So if we want to give our EC2 instance access to things, we start by setting up a policy that says anyone who has this policy is allowed to visit CodeArtifact. Okay, so that's why we're going to set up a policy and set up that rule. Okay, so let's create the policy now. And we're going to switch over to the JSON tab here. So switch over to JSON and paste this code that we provide in the project guide. Okay, so we've got a bunch of code here that we can now screenshot and just put into our documentation. We're not going to walk away before we fully get to understand what we've pasted though. So if you want to get to know what you've written here, here's your chance. All right, so a JSON document, or this JSON policy document, is like a security rulebook. It's written in specific format that AWS understands. Okay, so that's why you see all these kinds of like curly brackets and all these quote marks. This is a specific way of defining policies within AWS. And again, policies are basically just rules for what you can and cannot do. Now the first part is a bunch of, the first statement here basically says who has this policy, whoever has this policy, or basically, I think the better way to say this policy grants access to CodeArtifact. And it grants access to CodeArtifact in terms of being able to read the packages that are inside the repository, and also just be able to find the repository and access it in the first place. So that's what this one means. Get repository endpoint means you can find the repository. And then get authorization token. Guess what? It basically means the permission to run this command. So this policy is granting access to CodeArtifact in 3 ways. One, you can retrieve an authorization token. 2, you can find a repository. 3, you can also read the packages that are inside that repository. Okay. And I won't go into too much detail about the get service bearer token, but you can think about it as temporarily elevated access for CodeArtifact operations. So this is something that you can give to another resource to give them extra permissions for a limited amount of time. So they will always get this, the permission to do this, but the get service bearer token means that they can have elevated permissions, and really it's just to make sure that if you temporarily need to do something a bit more, CodeArtifact might be able to give you the permission to do that. Cool? Awesome. So you're going to notice that it doesn't give you permission to do everything in CodeArtifact. CodeArtifact has so many more other actions that you can do, but we're following the principle of least privilege here. We're not going to give our EC2 instance the permission to do more than it needs. So we're all good. Okay, and if you want to explore the code line by line, we have this extra little bit of explanation that you can definitely explore to learn more about to learn a little bit more about the policy document. Okay, actually, I just realized someone in the chat over Twitch has asked if we can talk a bit more about the get service bearer token. So you're in luck. You know, we have this guide that can help us with talking about this. Okay. So this is the second statement, and it says STS, which is the service, kind of like how CodeArtifact is a service, but this time the service is called STS, which is a security token service. And we're saying to the security token service, can we get service bearer token? Okay, so I would say it's a little bit, it can be a little bit confusing to put all of these policies together. I'm turning in my head what could be a best way to explain this, and I just realized we have the ask feature that we can try use to explain this together. So can you explain in one sentence what STS get bearer token does? Cool. The STS get service bearer token action allows the EC2 instance to request temporary security credentials from STS, specifically for CodeArtifact operations. My goodness, I think I would say this is a pretty useful definition. I'd also just like to mention that what you're doing here is you're basically going to STS, which is the service, the catch-all service, to get access to another service. And you're just saying, hey, STS, can I please have access to CodeArtifact? And then STS is going to say, okay, fine, you can have access to CodeArtifact. Here is like a token for you to talk to CodeArtifact. And then the resource, EC2 Instances, is going to use that token that it receives from STS to go and talk to CodeArtifact and do these actions. Okay, so every time you do an IAM policy, you're probably going to see STS a lot, because STS is that root service that lets a resource actually even have the permission to talk to another resource or talk to another service. Cool beans. I hope that helps, and then we'll just move on. I know we spent a lot of time on that policy there, but just know that the policy, if you don't understand it line by line yet, that's totally okay. It's more about the impact that we're interested in here for this hands-on project, and the impact is that it lets your EC2 instance access CodeArtifact, full stop. So the JSON policy we set up grants access to CodeArtifact. Specifically, it grants access to 3 key actions related to CodeArtifact. Retrieving an authorization token is one of them. What is another one? Can you remember? Finding the repository endpoint is one. And then the last one is viewing the packages inside the repository. Okay, so let us head on over to giving our policy a name, and we're going to give it a simple name like CodeArtifact next to consumer policy. If this name somehow already exists in your account, like it does in mine, cheeky, you can always just say, you can always add this project's name. So in our case, this is, I will just add CI/CD to the end to make it a bit simpler. And then let's add a description like this. And of course, no more new line characters. Cool. So once that's done, you can select create policy and create your policy straight away. Cool. So your policy should be all created now here. And what we're going to do is we're going to apply this policy to our EC2 instance. Cool. I'm just keeping an eye out for the chat here because I know we're now going into a more like different part of this project. It's more about IAM and policies and security, which is slightly different to what we're used to. So if you have any questions, just know I'm right here and we can talk about it straight away. Okay, so next up is to actually set up a role. So we don't have a policy a policy is not usually something you can give straight away to an EC2 instance. An EC2 instance gets access over another entity called roles. See how it's like that level above policies here? That role is going to be what actually grants our EC2 instance the access to CodeArtifact. Policies are simply rules, and you can't apply rules directly into resources like instances. Policies simply make up something that your resources can use, and that's called roles. So you need to put policies into a role and then put that role onto your EC2 instance. So in this step, we are setting up a role that uses the policy we just created. Then we will apply that role to our EC2 instance. Okay, so I know we're getting into like more permissions related things, but this is the last thing we need to set up permissions wise, and then we can see CodeArtifact at work. So let's go ahead and set up that role now. So let's select roles here and let's create a role. Cool. Who's going to get access to this role? An EC2 instance. So under the use case, we're going to need to select EC2 like this. And then we can select next. All right. And that helps us with setting up our role. So what are the kinds of permission policies and roles that this role is going to have? Don't forget, we just created one. We just created a permission policy. So here you can select custom and managed if you'd like to shorten the search results, because our policy is custom and managed. We created it ourselves. And what was the keyword in that policy? It was CodeArtifact. The one I created ended in CI/CD, so I'm going to be selecting that. But I think the one you created would just be this main one here. So you can select the main one you created. I'm just going to stick to what I set up just now, so I'm going to be selecting that same policy. Okay, so let's select next, and we can create the role right away. Okay, so our role is going to be called EC2 Instance Network CI/CD, which we can explain. And I'm going to rename one to something a bit more unique so I don't run into that name error. But in our case, our description is going to say, allows EC2 instances to access services related to the network CI/CD pipeline series. So that's correct. Yeah, this role basically just gives our EC2 instance the permission to access other services. In this case, it's CodeArtifact that it needs access to, and that's why that's the only permission that's inside. So we're going to create that role and apply that role to our EC2 instance. Cool. Great question from Gangada now on whether a role is just a collection of policies. If we like, let's talk about the definition of a role. I think it's actually quite an important type of IAM entity, so it's very, very worthwhile learning. Okay, so an IAM role is a set of permissions that's attached to an AWS resource rather than people. So it's kind of like a job description, and you can think about it as giving our EC2 instance a badge that says when you're wearing this badge, you have these permissions, you have the power to do this and this and this. A policy is simply the rules that make up a role. So for Gangada, what you're asking here, whether a role is a collection of policies, I think the simplest way to think about it is yes, it does. Yes, it is like a collection of policies. And eventually you're going to notice that roles can really combine all different kinds of policies to set up the exact kind of permission your EC2 instance will need for different things. Now, why do both exist? Why do you need both? In our case, it's very, very simple because we have a very simple situation set up here, because we simply have one instance, and that one instance just needs access to one service, which is CodeArtifact. But it's not always that simple. If you're thinking about roles and policies, just know that in production environments, in real world environments, you have so many different kinds of instances that are supposed to have a different set of permission to different things. You could have a group of development instances, you could have a group of instances designed for project A, another group of instances designed for project B. So how do you give those instances the permission to things in a very quick and efficient way? You have policies that define the roles, and then you have roles that say, okay, all instances that belong in group A should have access to this. So you set up like this group A template of permissions, and now you can just assign that role to every single instance that belongs in group A. What would be the less efficient way to do things is if you didn't have a role, because then you have no way to group policies together, and then you'd have no way to efficiently give an EC2 instance a set of permissions related to what that EC2 instance is supposed to do. So I highly rate roles. Right now, it's a bit less clear, I would say, on why roles are so helpful. But just think about scaling what you have. Imagine if there are different kinds of policies you need to put together. Imagine if different instances have different kinds of requirements. That's when roles become very powerful and very, very helpful for just making things like a bit painless compared to manually assigning permissions each time. Okay, so once you've set up your EC2 instance, we're going to switch our tabs back to EC2, and you have your EC2 instance selected already. So what's next for us is to just simply give that instance the permissions attached to that role. So security is what you're going to select under the actions tabs, and then you're going to say modify IAM role. All right, so this is where you can modify the IAM role related to your EC2 instance. Right now, there's nothing. There's no IAM role currently attached to the instance. So here, we're going to select the EC2 instance that we just set up. So it should say EC2 Instance Network-CI/CD for you. I'm just going to use EC2 Instance Network-CodeArtifact because that was the name of mine. And once it's done, you select Update IAM Role, and that's it. Now your EC2 instance is going to have access to CodeArtifact because it now has a role with that permission setting inside. Okay? Cool. I'm just checking the chat in case you have any questions, but I think we look okay for now. So I'm just going to answer this question here. Let's do it together. The advantage of using IAM roles instead of hard-coded credentials is that IAM roles are more secure and scalable. Do you know what hard-coded credentials mean? So hard-coded credentials basically means if we had gone the alternate route and ran this command that says AWS configure and then manually wrote these permission settings or these keys that give your EC2 instance permissions. That's not security best practice actually, giving your EC2 instance access to services over keys like this, because it's very, very easy for you to lose access to those keys and suddenly be like, oh, I don't actually have my login details anymore, basically, for your EC2 instance. It's also very, very common for people to lose their credentials to hackers who eventually steal these credentials and then use it for other reasons that damages their AWS account, racks up big bills, loses them data. So in our case, we did not use hard-coded credentials. We did not type into the terminal some login details or credential details to give our EC2 instance access to CodeArtifact. Instead, we use a role, which we apply over AWS and is a lot more secure. So let's just mention that in our answer here. And let's mention that hard-coded credentials are much more vulnerable to security attacks and getting misused, resulting in errors, losses, delays. Here we have IAM roles, which are applied via AWS and do not require any hard coding of credentials, which really protects, which is much more secure and encrypted. You could also mention here that IAM roles are also the better option if you want to give the same set of permissions for multiple instances. It's so much more efficient. Okay, so it's now time for us to just run that command to export our code artifact authorization token. We did a big detour there just now, but the reason for that detour was really just so that EC2 Instance can run this command. So let's press enter, and there we go. Just like that, our EC2 Instance successfully ran the command. And this gives us 12 hours of access to our code artifact repository. Great. All right, so to just recap on that success, to resolve the error with our security token, we set up an IAM policy that grants access to code artifact. And then an IAM role that we can attach to our EC2 instance. Okay, this resolved the error because our EC2 instance now has access to request an authorization token. From our repository. All done. Okay, so we just have the last step to go now, which is to see the packages in code artifact now that we're all connected. H has a great question here. Should code artifact only be used by AWS services, or can it be used locally too? This is great, and you can definitely use it locally. Just like how you can see these connection settings, they don't mention you have to use them for an AWS service. You can definitely run this locally too. But your challenge then is to figure out how can you give your local computer the permission to access code artifact. So that's a whole other chapter that you can explore. But I highly recommend going into it if you're interested. Okay, team. So we've got step 7 left. This is our last step together. Oh, but it's okay. We're almost done. And I think we can be excited because now we can finally see the packages that are in code artifact. This step is so crucial. It's really like the coming together of all of the setup that we've been doing all this time and all of the errors we've been trying to troubleshoot. Let's do it. We're gonna, to see these packages that our web app needs in code artifact, we're gonna be setting up something called a settings.xml file, which tells Maven how to find code artifact. You know how when we run an SSH command, we have to give our EC2 instance 2 things, the permission to do it and also the path to find we have to give our local computer 2 things when we run that SSH command. 1, the path to find the EC2 instance, and 2, the permission to unlock that EC2 instance. It's literally the same thing here. We're trying to tell Maven in our EC2 instance now that you can connect to code artifact. So we need to give it 2 things. 1, the path to find our code artifact repository, and 2, the permission to unlock it. We've just set up the permission to unlock it. Luckily, our EC2 instance now has access to code artifact, But by default, it doesn't really know where that code artifact repository lives. So now we're going to be setting up the settings.xml file, which is kind of like giving it the directions to figure out how to use this code artifact repository and where to find it. In this step, we will set up the connection between code artifact and, do you remember? And our web app, which in brackets is actually just Maven, because Maven is the actual package manager that needs to talk to code artifact and retrieve these packages. To do this, we need to set up a settings.xml file. This file gives Maven the instructions for finding our code artifact repository and using it to retrieve packages. Okay, so let's get into this. And to do this, we've got settings.xml here. So we already have a bit of help from our code artifact connection panel. And here we have steps 4, 5, and 6 all kind of like screaming for your attention, saying, look at all this code. Don't be alarmed. This code is actually very, very simple once we break it down together. So this code comes in 3 sections, and the first section is step 4, and it says servers. The servers section is where you store your access details to the repository. Do you see how the service section just says 3 things? Here is your ID of your repository. It's called Network DevOps CI/CD. The username by default is AWS, and the password, so your access credentials, is inside this auth token here. And where did this auth token come from? Does it look familiar at all? This auth token came from you running this command in your terminal. So when you ran that command in step 3, you aren't just getting access to the repository, you're storing the password that gives you access in this little variable called the code artifact auth token. And then in here, you're saying, I'm going to save that password into this little variable and use that in the server section. So the server section is basically telling Maven, this is how you get access, and this is where you can find, and this is the name of the repository we use. Cool. The name of the repository, your password for accessing it. That's step 4. And then step 5 has its own bit of code that we need to add to our settings.xml file. But the profile section is slightly different. It basically is a section just for saying when Maven should use which repository. We only have one package repository in this project, so we don't have much to think about here. There's only one default repository we need to use, and it's called the Network DevOps CI/CD repository. It's more that if you have multiple repositories to use, you would have multiple different kinds of profiles that tell Maven, this is when you should go to this repository, this is when you should go to that repository. Okay, so this section isn't too important, but it's just a required part of our settings.xml file. Okay, so here we also have, I would say, this is where you would set up a mirror, which is basically a rule that says whether or not you can go to a backup kind of repository if you want Network DevOps CI/CD to go to a backup repository. Okay, that was a very, very funny way to say it. But what I was trying to say there is that sometimes with your code artifact repository, you can actually delegate another backup repository or like a fallback repository to provide packages if your repository and the upstream repository don't have it. So in this case, we have just one default backup location, and that's our own code artifact repository again. For any repository or like package requests, okay, denoted by this, Maven is simply going to direct those requests to the same code artifact repository. It's our only local one. So we really don't need a mirror to anything else. I hope that makes sense, but essentially this section is basically saying just stick to the repository we've got. Don't need to look for any other repositories out there to give Maven packages. All right, so now that we have all of these connection instructions, oops, I accidentally exited this. What's next for us is to actually make use of this code. We've understood it now, but are we using it yet? Nah, we're not. We're not. So we gotta use these things by creating a settings.xml file at the root of our project. So let's create a new file here. Oof, and it should be at the root of the project, guys. So let's just make sure it doesn't sit in any of these subfolders. The file that you create should really be at the root here. So it shouldn't be inside a subfolder, it should be at the main area. And it's called settings.xml. And it's gonna become a part of our project. Okay, very nice. So let us copy this code here like this, paste that, that's step 4 done. And then we can copy the code for step 5 here, copy, paste it, that's step 5 done. And then just copy the code for step 6 if you want. This is honestly super optional, so no judgment if you don't need this. And then save that here too. We're not done yet, we just have 2 more lines to add. And they're called settings tags. And these settings tags are like basically the parent tags that contains all of the settings you put in underneath. Okay, like this. So you've got your parent tags at the top, and then these 3 sections in the middle. You can even indent them for better formatting if you'd like, so that it's a bit more clear that all of these sections are basically nested within these parent settings tags that you've written. I'm just gonna zoom in here so it's easier to read. But as you can see, I've got my settings tag, the parent one. I've copied in step 4 here. I've copied in step 5 here. I've copied in step 6 here, and then the closing settings tag at the bottom. Okay, so you can set up your project this way. And now that you have your settings file set up, you're gonna need to save the file. So I've pressed Control S now to save my file, and that will take that little circle away so that it shows up as saved instead. Okay. So I hope that helps with understanding settings.xml. In one sentence, I would say settings.xml just tells Maven how to use your code artifact repository. Full stop. Okay, and once it's all done, you can take a screenshot of settings.xml and explain what you've just created today in your documentation. The settings.xml file configures Maven to use our code artifact repository. It supplies Maven with the name and authentication token, to get access to code artifact, or specifically the code artifact repository. And also sets up a profile section in case we ever have multiple repositories and we need to tell Maven when to use which one. All right. So now that we have Now that we have settings.xml all set up, what's next for us to do is to actually just see those packages start filling in our CodeArtifact repository. So here we're going to run pwd to just double check whether or not we're at the root of our project folder. So you should see /network-web-project at the end there. And then we're going to run a command that says nvn-s settings.xml compile. Now this command is a pretty powerful one. Okay, it does some compiling, and we're going to talk about compiling now. Okay, it's going to run. It's going to look a little crazy. And in the meantime, compiling is basically translating your project's code into a language that computers can run. Maven is also our compiler. It does so many jobs. It's the package manager. It's also the compiler. So Maven is the tool that also tries to turn all of this code that we've written in programming language into a language that machines can actually run. And when it compiles, it's going to need access to all of the packages that your web app needs in order to run. Is it coming together now? So this is kind of the flow that we've set up. Step 1, tell Maven I want to compile things. Step 2, Maven goes to compile. It says, all right, let's translate all of your web app code into something that a machine can run. And then step 3, while it's compiling, it's going to need to drag in all of the packages and all of the dependencies that your web app needs to work. Step 4, it's going to say, oh, I need all of these packages. Where should I go? It uses your settings.xml file, which you've defined in the command, to go and visit your CodeArtifact repository. Step 5, Maven goes to CodeArtifact repository, asks for all of these packages, and in CodeArtifact repository is going to say, hey buddy, I'm an empty repository. So step 6, your CodeArtifact repository is going to go to the upstream repository to request all of the packages that Maven's asked it to get. Then all of those packages is going to flow from upstream all the way to the local repository and then retrieved by Maven. Step 7 or 8, your build is a success. Once Maven has access to all of the packages that it needs, it can successfully say, I have finished compiling this project, and go back to bed. It took us a bit of time there. It took us about 1 minute to compile our web app. It's going to be so much faster after this because all of those packages are already going to be stored in your local repository, which is going to be a lot more faster to retrieve than if they were living still on the internet, online. Okay. Oh, actually, instead of me saying if they were living on the internet, more like if we have to retrieve them directly from the public source, that would take longer. It would take about a minute every single time we run this command. In fact, just for fun, let me just run that command one more time so you can see how much faster it is now. Now we're going to do the same thing. Just build the project one more time and look at how fast it is now. It took 1 second because all of the packages are already inside your local repository. So this is so much fun. Another way we can prove to ourselves that we've got it all downloaded now is by checking out our CodeArtifact repository. I know we're really excited to do this, but I also just realized we have a question to answer here. So let's answer it and give it our full focus. Okay. Compiling means the process of translating our web app source code into something that machines can run. Maven is our compiler. So we asked Maven to compile our web app code. While it's compiling, Maven will need to put together all of the packages that it needs, that your web app needs in order to run. To retrieve these packages, Maven visits CodeArtifact, who will then request the exact packages from the upstream repository. Or really, actually the correct flow is that CodeArtifact will say, I don't have any. So Maven will go upstream to request the exact same packages from the upstream repository, which is Maven Central. And once Maven has those packages, store local copies in the CodeArtifact repository. So that's the real flow there. And we talk about that in detail in here. If the dependency isn't already in CodeArtifact, Maven will fetch it from the upstream repository, which is Maven Central, and then cache it in CodeArtifact to make it easier to retrieve next time. Cool? All right, I hope that was helpful. See it to believe it. Let's go back into CodeArtifact now, and let's just close this cheeky little window here, because we're gonna go and refresh our page. It's a bit scary to see that we have no packages available, but is that really true? Let's click on that refresh button and see what happens. Look at all of these packages. Whoa. So turns out Maven is made of many mini packages inside, right? There's so many mini things that Maven actually needs in order to work. So is same case for Java. Java is actually made up of other packages inside that Java needs in order to run. So because of that, we've got so many things in here that we probably won't recognize everything, but these are all packages that represent things or external pieces of code that our web app needs in order to run. Okay, so let's take a screenshot of our packages panel, and just like our description mentions, let's take a square screenshot because it's going to go into your documentation's cover page, and they look better when they're square, which is quite a funny thing, but yeah, that's the truth. Should I just like kind of do this? Oh yeah, I think this looks nice. So let me set up a square-ish kind of screenshot. Is this square enough, team? I think that's pretty square. Take that, put that in my documentation, and let's explain. After compiling, we checked our CodeArtifact repository, and we noticed 4 pages of packages inside. This tells us that we successfully stored our web app's dependencies in a artifact repository. Okay. Congrats! Our CodeArtifact setup is working. Maven is using it to store all of the packages that we need. And that is step 3 or project 3 of our DevOps challenge, all done. You're more than welcome to wrap up here and finish for the day. Congratulations. I know we spent a little bit more than 2 hours today, so I appreciate everyone's patience. And if you'd like, you can join me in tackling the extra secret mission, where you can gain even more advanced CodeArtifact skills. Are you up for the challenge? If you want to experience the full power of CodeArtifact, we can become a package publisher, which means we can now figure out how we can write our own package and upload that package into CodeArtifact and store it in that repository. This mission is going to give you a much deeper understanding of how companies manage their own custom code libraries. Because as we learned, what Maven, this upstream repository, can do is it can just retrieve external libraries for us, like public repositories, public packages, sorry. But what is happening sometimes is that your engineer next door might have created a package and you want to use that package. But your engineer is like, oh, it contains some, some private code. We don't really want everyone to have access to it. I just want you to have access to it. So what's a good way to store the package in that case? So the good way to store that package in that case is to privately upload that into your internal repository, which is this CodeArtifact repository. So let's go ahead and start off this secret mission. Jump here. And the secret mission should take about 10 minutes to do. All right, so in this secret mission, we are going to we also decided to become a package publisher, which means publishing our own packages into our CodeArtifact repository. This is useful in situations where you might have internal team members developing their own packages and wanting their fellow teammates to have access to it without giving the entire world access, if you were to make it public. So how we can do this is we can open our Cloud Shell terminal. So if you're new to Cloud Shell is basically a way for you to run code within your AWS browser, within your AWS Management Console. So open up your Cloud Shell terminal, which is right here. Let's click on that. Okay. And then you can run this little code that creates a file. And this file that we're going to create is called echo. Hello, this is a test package. So this is going to be a little package that we set up. It's just going to contain some text, but of course, in real world scenarios, the package is going to contain lots of code. Okay, so we can safely paste this code in here. And this creates our text file that we can now try to bundle into a package. So let's bundle it into a package like this. Okay. Ooh. And as you might notice, we've created like a very interesting little file here. So we've basically just run this command that says, using something called tar, which is a software that can help you bundle files into packages. Can we please bundle up this text file that we created called secret mission text and bundle it into this little file called secretmission.tar.gz. I know this is a funky little command to be looking at, but basically this is telling us that tar is kind of like zip. You know how we have zip files that bundles up things into, these nice packages for us? In this case, we're using another kind of tool for it. It's called tar, and it's the alternative to zip. We're using tar because it already comes built in a lot of these Linux machines, so that we don't need to install anything else. And it is really the preferred way to bundle up packages in a lot of engineering-like situations. So let us run our next command, which is about securing this package that we've created. So this package contains code, and let's secure this package by running our next command that creates a security hash. So this security hash helps with creating like a digital fingerprint for your file. What this will really do is that it processes your file, it generates this unique string, which is your security file, and it lets CodeArtifact approve that this file is like untampered with. I'm gonna keep this definition light because I understand we might be new to security hashes, but you're pretty much giving CodeArtifact this very, very long number, and it says, hey, I'm gonna hash my file and it produces this number. And then when you pass the file over to CodeArtifact, it's gonna hash the file in the exact same way, and then it's gonna compare numbers. Does my hash number look exactly the same as your hash number? If they look different, that tells CodeArtifact that someone in the middle altered your file, because an altered file results in a different hash number. That will tell CodeArtifact that your file is no longer safe and it wouldn't store it in your repository. So this is a great security practice. It's a bit of an extra for experts thing that we're adding into the secret mission. You can actually even see what is the hash that was generated by running echo, like this. So we ran this command called echo. Just tell me what is the hash that was created, and then this was the hash that was created. Okay, so CodeArtifact is going to try to hash what was the package that you created to see if these numbers line up. Okay, so let's answer this now. To create our own package, we set up a text file and use tar to package up that text file. We also generated a security hash because that will give CodeArtifact a way to figure out whether or not the package has been tampered with in transit. If it's been tampered with, the security hash that CodeArtifact generates does not match up to the security hash we generate. All right, so let's select done. And now let's time to deploy that package to CodeArtifact. So this is a bunch of CLI code. And using this code, you can run this in your Cloud Shell terminal again. And this basically is a command, a text command, that tells AWS that you'd like to upload this file that you've created and upload it into your Nextwork DevOps CI/CD repository. See that here? So now you're uploading your package. Can you find it? Shall we go have a look? All right. If you're new to all of these, just know that this command, we'll look at that in a second. But what I was going to mention is that these commands are written in something called Nextwork CLI, which is like the text command way to do things in AWS. Instead of using clicks and code to be like upload package or create package, you're using text commands instead to do the same things. And we have a lot of parameters here that basically just tells CodeArtifact the details around how we want to upload this package. Now I see that it says we have an error here. Asset content, blob values must be a path to a file. Now in this case, maybe there was an error in this command. Can you find it? I can find it. So in our command here, it says secret package.tar.gz. Is that the name of the package we created? Not really. The name of our package is called secret mission. So we just simply need to update this. We simply need to update this command to use our actual package name instead. So it should use secret mission instead of secret package. And let's see if that solves things for us. And let's run that command one more time. And there we go. So this is a success state. If you can see a response in the terminal like this, it means that we've successfully uploaded our package into our CodeArtifact repository, which is amazing. So shall we go check out our CodeArtifact repository and see if it's uploaded? Okay, so you can take a screenshot here. Put that in your documentation. And let's go check out CodeArtifact now. So in your CodeArtifact repository, what do you see now? Don't forget to refresh your repository. Okay, and let's see. Can we tell? It was called, the package is called agent package. Oh, no way, agent package, right here. And the namespace is secret mission. Ah, this is our package. It's uploaded. Oh, damn, it looks great. Okay, so let's open it up. And you can see the origin, it was published a minute ago because we published it. The origin is next to DevOps CI/CD, which basically means that there's no upstream repository here. The only repository is the repository that we uploaded it to, which makes sense because this is not a public thing. This is the only repository that has access to this package. Amazing. Okay, isn't that so cool? So just like that, we've uploaded our own package into CodeArtifact. To publish the package, we ran a CLI command that lets us upload the package we created in Cloud Shell to our repository. When we look at the package's details in CodeArtifact, we see the version number, publish date, and even the origin. In this case, the CodeArtifact repository itself is the origin. Okay. I understand the secret mission is quite advanced. We're using completely different kinds of skills, but isn't it cool that we're still interacting with the same service, CodeArtifact? I love it. I love it. So we're about to finish up with the secret mission now. Our 10 minutes is almost up. To finish off, we're going to go full circle in this secret mission and try to retrieve our own package, but over our EC2 instance. So I'm going to see if this is going to work. Let's see. We're going to go into our terminal, our EC2 instance terminal, and we're going to say, hey, there is a new package that's been uploaded. Can I please have that package? Let's see. Here are all the details of the package I want access to. Can I request that, please? Can I download it, please? And I think this secret package asset name should update to secret mission, because it caused an error just now. And let's try running that. Aha! And now you're going to see you're not allowed to do that in your EC2 instance. Can you tell why? It's because our EC2 instance does not have the permission to do this when we set up our IAM role. So for us to actually run this command, what you're going to need to do is you might want to go back to your Cloud Shell terminal where you do have access. Okay, so head back to your Cloud Shell terminal and run that same command, but from your Cloud Shell terminal instead. Oh. Okay, so let's run that same command, this time from the Cloud Shell terminal, and ta-da! It tells us that we do have a package now inside here called secret mission tar.gz. In fact, what might be helpful is if I were to remove this package, try to delete it. So I would run remove rm. So from my Cloud Shell terminal, let me try to remove the package I just downloaded. And let me try downloading it again with that same command. So I'm going to try downloading it again like this with the same command. And if I run ls again, you can still see that it's here, even though I removed it. So I wish I'd done this sooner. Hold on. Let me remove it one more time. Oops. Let me just remove the file one more time. Oh, it's already been removed. If I run ls, you can see that the file is no longer there. And ls is the command for listing everything that's in this directory. If you can't see it, it means it no longer exists. So what we're going to do now is we're going to say, it no longer exists. Let's download it again. And then run ls one more time. And now it's back. It exists again. So we're successfully now downloading packages directly from a repository, which is awesome. So what we're going to do next is let's try to uncover this file and try to read what's inside. Can you see? Hello, this is a test package. So with those two last commands, you are able to see the original message that you wrote in your package because we ran the command to basically unzip the file and read what's inside. Awesome. So that's a wrap for our secret mission. I know the secret mission ramps up the difficulty level or the complexity by quite a bit. So I hope you feel the challenge. I hope you find this exciting. And if it's at all confusing, let us know in the comments, let us know in the chat. I'd love to answer any questions you might have. Okay, so to validate our packages, what do we do? To validate our packages, what was the next thing we did? We then tried to download our package back into the Cloud Shell terminal. We saw a package successfully downloaded, installed from CodeArtifact, and then we unzipped the package and read what was inside. We could see the very package, the text that we wrote inside the package or inside the text file. Before we packaged it up. This proves to us that CodeArtifact successfully stored one of our own custom packages that we can retrieve later on as well. Great work, team. Woohoo! So we've now experienced the full power of CodeArtifact from both sides. This is exactly how companies like to manage their internal libraries to make sure that developers have equal access to their code packages and everything is secure and everything is also version controlled. If you'd like to know more, we have a bonus note for all of the experts. I hope you enjoy reading it. It helps you learn a little bit more about how CodeArtifact works manually versus in an automated way, and it relates to what we just did before. So that's a secret little bonus for all of our secret mission takers. And that really, really wraps up everything that we've done in today's project now. So thank you so much for sticking through this secret mission with me. I had a lot of fun. I hope you also learned a little bit extra, from that secret mission. What did you think about that? Was that a little difficult? Did that excite you? Was it a right level of challenge? Let me know. Okay, so to wrap up for today's project, let us go ahead to delete all of our resources. Let's delete the EC2 instance, our IAM roles and policies, we don't need them anymore until the next project. And we can also delete our CodeArtifact resources. So shall we start with our EC2 instance? I'm going to select my instance, which I think is here. So once I select my instance here, I'm going to select instance state, and I'm going to select terminate to delete that instance. Delete that now. and off it goes. It's going to get shut down. Awesome. So next up, I always love seeing this. The moment you delete it, your connection via your SSH connection over VS Code just like dies immediately. You can see it says it cannot reconnect anymore, which is okay. And we can also now delete our IAM resources. So we've got IAM that we're going to go visit and just delete those resources too. And yeah, thank you so much to H for mentioning. Thank you for all the answers and your patience. I want to say thank you back to you as well. I know we're doing challenging things. So thank you for your patience, and thank you for all of the interest that you're putting into this challenge. As you do these projects, keep asking questions. It's really, really good. They're really, really good questions. All right, next up, we're just going to delete the roles that we created today and the policies that we created. So we created the CodeArtifact policy, the CodeArtifact role for our EC2 instance. We don't need that anymore, so let's delete that. Oh, and I think what you might want to find is CI/CD instead. I think this is the role that you would have created. That's the name of your role. Okay, so you've got that deleted. The policy, you no longer need your CodeArtifact policy. So go into the policies page. I just realized I'm in the wrong page. Head to the policies page, and let's delete the policy that you've created. I know I have an extra of everything, but I promise you that there's a reason for that, a secret reason in the background. And let us just delete the policy that you created in this project. Okay, so we're going to delete that policy. We don't need that anymore. And then we're going to set up, we're going to delete the CodeArtifact resources too. Okay, so we've got CodeArtifact resources we can delete now. Let's delete the two repositories we've set up today. Delete. And same with the Nextwork DevOps CI/CD repository, and same with the domain. We don't need that anymore. Okay, so let's delete them all, and we have the local files left. So your DevOps folder you no longer need, this one, so we can just delete this entire thing as well. Okay, so now that the DevOps folder is gone, we've cleared our resources. Nice work. You can also quit VS Code while we're at it. We probably don't need that to wrap up the project. So we're like done, which is great. I think we're officially all cleared up for our resources. So we can do a final reflection of today's project. And I'll just make sure to go through everything that we did today, because I understand that it is a harder project that we tackled today. So Gangadan, no worries, I got you. Let's do the overview together. Okay, but yeah, good to delete all of these resources now. And let's head on over to our reflection. Services we used in this project include, today we learned about CodeArtifact, we learned about Amazon EC2. What else did we learn about? We also used GitHub and VS Code. And we definitely also used IAM for permission settings. Key concepts we learned include using artifact repositories, connecting Maven with CodeArtifact, setting up IAM permissions to give our EC2 instance the permission to access CodeArtifact. This project took us approximately, I would like to say 2.5 hours now, but this includes some demo time and Q&A time and troubleshooting time. The most challenging part, oh, and the secret mission. The most challenging part was the secret mission today. We started using CLI commands and ran into a few errors around file names and permission settings. Still, it was super rewarding to do it. I would also say it was most rewarding to see CodeArtifact fill up with heaps of packages when the connection was all set up. We did this project today. As a part of the 7-day DevOps challenge. This project helped us learn about CodeArtifact and why artifact repositories exist. I also think it's just a really, really great learning about packages in general. I learned a lot from packages from doing this project myself. So lots of learnings about packages and package management as well. Great stuff. Well, this project is part 3 of a series of DevOps projects where we're building a CI/CD pipeline. We'll be working on the next project same time tomorrow. I know this one was a bit of a ramp up in difficulty, wasn't it? So I appreciate everyone's kind of positive attitude for taking on this new challenge. Thank you so much for being here. And yeah, we're ready to see our documentation at the end of this project. So let me create our documentation, and in the meantime, it seems like we're waiting on a few tasks to complete. Is that true? Let me refresh the page and see that again. Is that true? Oh. What's the task? What did I miss, team? Have I missed a task today? Uh-oh. Interesting. Let me just have a look into this. Have I perhaps missed a task today? Oh, I see. This is something that I'll have to just troubleshoot and fix in the background after this live, team. But if you see the reason why, I troubleshooted by looking at the low touch track of this project, and I noticed we have a task that lives in the low touch track, and I forgot to delete it. I was supposed to delete this before I went live, so that was my mistake. Let me fix this after the live. In the meantime, this was a task to fill out if you haven't created a GitHub repository before this project. So to create the web app, we can use GitHub to store the web app code, basically. We can use GitHub as a repository and connect it to our local repository. I'm so sorry, team. If you were stuck with completing this project, this is probably the reason why. So I just had to switch over to the low touch track to answer that task, but I'm also just gonna fix that straight away after this. Okay, so I'm gonna switch back to high touch now, and generate my documentation for today. Okay, mission accomplished, everyone. So while we wait for the documentation to generate, this is the time for me to now go over what we did today. So this is the overview time as requested by Gangadhar. Now, in today's project overview, today's goal was really about securing packages related to our web app. The reason why packages exist is because we don't write everything from scratch ourselves when we create a web app. We actually use packages, which are pieces of code that other people have written before, and you simply have to go online, download their piece of code, and then use that in your web app. Now, the security problem that comes with using packages is that it's actually quite tricky to be downloading packages from the internet all the time. That's one problem, security. The second problem is that packages change version numbers all the time. So if I download a package today, I could get version 3, and I'm in a team with you, and I say, hey, download this package, we need this for the web app. You download the package, you get version 4. And the moment we have different versions, we might be getting different results when we try to run the same web app. That was problem 2. And then the third thing was just making sure that, I would say the third thing was also about speed and efficiency. So grabbing packages from the internet takes time. Maven will take time when it needs to grab packages from the internet all the time, and that just adds the time it takes to build your web app. So that was the reason why we set up CodeArtifact, and the whole project was really just about having CodeArtifact in your project in the first place. We had a whole detour creating policies and roles in IAM because that was definitely required for our EC2 instance to even get access to CodeArtifact. Otherwise, even if you set up your CodeArtifact repository, it's not connected to your web app. That's why we really needed to set up those policies and those roles so that the connection can happen, and our web app and CodeArtifact can actually talk to each other, and CodeArtifact can supply the packages that our web app needs, or store the packages, that our web app needs. So, all right. So that was the overview. I hope that helps, Gangadhar. Let me know if that's what you were looking for. And let's save our project to our portfolio. So I'm going to save this to my portfolio now, save it up. Okay, and it's saved in our portfolio now, so I can open it in a new tab. And you can also save it as a PDF, which I'm going to do next. And I'm going to use the fun theme today to save it as a PDF. And I'm going to save that now. I'm going to download that as a PDF. Thank you so much to Robot for saying well done. I appreciate it. And I can see we might have a bit of a funky issue with our documentation today. So I'm really sorry it seems like our documentation isn't loading properly today. So I'm just going to do a quick solution. Bear with me 1 second, and I'm going to bring up that documentation for us. Yeah, Gangadhar says it is a challenging day today. I appreciate your patience with it. I think CodeArtifact is probably one of the most challenging ones to understand. Build and code deploy, the next two, are actually slightly simpler in concept. So I hope you stick around, and I'll see you in tomorrow's project where we set up actually slightly simpler parts of our CI/CD pipeline. Okay, so, all right. I appreciate everyone's patience. I know I'm just trying to bring up my documentation for today's project. I'm going to see if there is a way for me to do this because there's an error right now. Oopsies. All right, here it is. So here's some documentation that, here's an example of what your documentation can look like at the end of this project. So it is a bunch of, I know that it looks a little barren right now because this is the template version of it and I just need to fix something in the back end. But this is what your documentation will look like as a template. And let me share with you the proper version when I'm done in the comments section, so that I'm going to add it to my portfolio and then share that with you straight away. Cool beans. So once you have your PDFs together, what you do next is you can upload this and publish it in LinkedIn. So here's a post summarizing everything you've done in today's project. You can click out of it and then you can select more. Select the add a document and choose a file. So here's an example file that you could use. The documentation for securing packages with CodeArtifact. So you can upload that onto LinkedIn as well. So this is an example of what you could do to also attach your documentation to your project today. All right, team, that was so much fun, and that is a wrap for today's project. I know we had a lot of different kinds of errors, we had lots of different questions. It is one of the harder projects in this entire series, so you're doing an amazing job, and thank you so much for sticking through it. I'm so excited for us because we have a big project coming up tomorrow using Code Build, where you start to really put things together and connect with GitHub to build your web app and put it into a file. We'll see what it looks like when we see it tomorrow, and I'll catch you then. In the meantime, please take care. Please share your documentation. I'm going to fix it right after this live, and I hope you all have a lovely day. This is awesome. Thank you so much. If you have any questions, the Nextcloud community is always available, and you can always ask in the chat in the comment section as well. Thanks, everyone. See you tomorrow. Bye-bye.